which I believe was not correct, and linking us together.
And that was the cause of the investors
It was
to run on your bank?
one of the causes.
And what are some of the
I
others?
believe.
I'm curious.
I believe it was the unrealized losses at our portfolio and the belief that we would have had to sell those securities.
How did they find out about that?
It's disclosed publicly.
By you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Cortez Masto. Senator Lummis of Wyoming is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I recall when Signature Bank failed that there was a lot of blame placed on digital assets, so I want to explore that a little bit. Mr. Shea, you put a lot of emphasis in your testimony on your customers in the digital asset industry, and you mentioned in your testimony digital assets 10 times, implying that digital assets was a driver of Signature Bank's collapse. So I want to explore that a little bit. Did Signature Bank hold digital assets?
I did not. Signature Bank did not hold or custody any digital assets, but I just want to clarify one thing.
And did you trade digital assets?
No.
So the point here is you had depositors that were in the digital asset industry, correct?
Yes.
But the deposits were in U.S. dollars. They were in cash, like any other depositor, correct?
Yes, all the deposits were in U.S. dollars.
Okay, so according to the New York DFS, deposits from digital asset businesses in cash, not crypto, made up about 18% of total deposits prior to your bank's collapse. Also, according to New York DFS, outflows on March 10th were relatively proportional, meaning depositors who had nothing to do with digital assets were responsible for the significant majority of withdrawals during the run. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, I did not point earlier, as in the first part of your first question, to digital assets being a particular cause or not.
Well, you used the term 10 times during your testimony, and then later, of course, in the previous questions from Senator Cortez Masto, you've placed blame everywhere, but accepted absolutely none yourselves. Now, from the FDIC, the root cause, this is a quote, the root cause of Signature Bank's failure was poor management. Signature's board of directors and management pursued rapid, unrestrained growth without developing and maintaining adequate risk management practices and controls. So you had regulators telling you that there were inadequate risk management controls in your bank, and you allowed them to go unaddressed for a very long time. Why is that?
The board was making sure that these were addressed. The bank was actively trying to ameliorate and making progress in the controls.
And what were the controls?
It was doing such things as raising insured brokered CDs, such as seeking to have repo agreements with primary dealers, such as further diversifying its deposit base, such as limiting largest deposits, such as holding high-quality, shorter-term securities, holding assets that were strong assets, continuing to increase, doing liquidity stress testing on a very frequent basis, and improving those liquidity stress test models, to the best of my knowledge, as was being shown to the regulators. So the bank was, from my perspective as chairman of the board, taking active roles to ameliorate and to address those risks in an active basis.
Yet on March 12th, there were requests for withdrawals of about $8 billion, and there were only about $4 billion in assets in the bank. correct?
I'm not familiar with what those numbers were on Friday. There were requests for $18 billion in deposit withdrawals, all in the space of a few hours.
Okay, so the cash available to fulfill those withdrawals was inadequate.
That morning, my recollection was that the bank had $29 billion in available liquidity from the Federal Home Bank and Federal Reserve plus the cash. I believe that number that you mentioned.
Well, I noticed that you described in your testimony that, and Mr. Howell, you described it as profoundly disappointing. Mr. Shea, you said it was a devastating day for you. I'm sure it was. It also was for your employees and your depositors. I am a proponent of state-chartered banks. I'm a proponent of digital asset industries. It looks like there's been a lot of deflection of blame onto those particular depositors that deal in digital assets and onto regulators, but you haven't accepted any blame yourself. And so I find that disconcerting and disappointing. I know you're profoundly disappointed. I can assure you that your depositors are as well. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Lummis. Senator Warnock of Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've seen this movie before, and we have a sense of how bad it can get. Back during the 2008 crisis, we all remember that many of the bankers who got us into that mess kept their cushy salaries while families across the country lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost everything. I continue to serve my church, and I work with communities where the poor and the marginalized middle-class people are held to higher standards than this. They miss a single payment, and they're slammed with overdraft fees, something I've addressed time and time again on this committee, or they have threats of having their car repossessed, their lives turned upside down, missing one payment. Hardworking families, it seems to me, shouldn't have to bail out the bankers or any executive of any company who made risky and unnecessary bets that failed. Mr. Becker, what was your compensation over the last year?
Senator, as of our proxy for 2022, my compensation that was listed there was, I think, $9.9 million.
Okay, so close to $10 million, somewhere in that ballpark.
If I could clarify one point, Senator, 70% of that is tied to long-term compensation. So just to clarify, that would have been paid out over 3 to 4 years, not in the current year.
But it's still a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
Yes or no, because we have limited time. Do you believe that poor management and decision-making were principal factors in your bank's failure?
Senator, what I tried to articulate in my written
yes or no,
testimony.
do you believe that poor management and decision-making were principal factors in your bank's failure? Yes or no?
Senator, I believe it was a series of unprecedented events that all came together in the fastest bank run in history.
Did you make any poor decisions?
Senator, based on a previous question that was asked about looking at...
Yes or no?
Senator, I believe it was a series of unprecedented events that all came together in the fastest bank run in history.
Did you make any poor decisions?
Senator, based on a previous question that was asked about looking at in hindsight, I truly do believe that with the information we had at the time when we made our decisions, that we made the best decisions that we could have.
Yes or no, did you consider the consequences of your decisions on the wider financial system? The number of uninsured deposits you had at your bank, the issues that have already been raised here. Did you consider the consequences of your decisions for these ordinary folks that I'm talking about back in Georgia who would lose their home, lose everything over much smaller lapses? Who are just trying to hold it together. They don't have the high class problem of $10 million over a few years. Did you consider them when you were making your decisions?
Senator, the uninsured depositors that you mentioned, that has been consistent at SVB for as long as I've been involved in the organization.
Do you think it's fair for small businesses and families to face additional burdens as a result of your failures?
Senator, as I mentioned, I'm sorry for any impact that's happening with clients or employees, shareholders, to include small business.
Right. So I understand that the board sets your pay, but you still hold responsibility here. I've heard your answer to my colleagues this morning that you will comply with regulations and legal enforcement if forced to return compensation. I guess I want to ask a slightly different question. In the wake of your failure, do you think it's right for you to keep that money?
Senator, the vast majority of my compensation was in stock, and I held 5 times that level. It was required by my board of directors because I so believed in the institution. On March 10th, that went to 0 because I planned to keep it until after I retired because that's how much I believed in the institution.
So you think you should keep the money, the compensation? Is that the answer?
Senator, the point I'm making is that I have been impacted by the stock and on March 10th when the stock went to 0.
So, you know, I guess my point here is that it seems to me that as we think about this and we look at what we've got to do going forward, we've got to center the concerns of ordinary people. You know, people who are just trying to make it, like most Americans, most Georgians, from paycheck to paycheck. Those are the folks I'm thinking about, and I'll be considering as we think about what we need to do moving forward. Thank you so much.
Senator Fetterman's recognized from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, you know, and I'm also, right, Chairman, I'm the last one speaking tonight on the...
Go for it.
The last one?
Last one.
Yeah, so I'm the last guy, so there's not much left on the bones after, you know, over 2 hours of going back and forth. And in fact, I've heard some of my colleagues actually heard that they went to go to Hawaii's after there was a crash of your bank, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So I went up on the internet, and it's like, it did happen. It did happen. It did happen. And that's in Fortune. The second biggest bank in U.S. history collapsed and chose to go to Hawaii on that. Yeah, I've never been to Hawaii, and neither has my family. I guess I haven't crashed a bank, you know. So given that I'm the last person, I don't have much left to ask, but I will, you know, let me ask you this one particular question to put to everyone here on that. And is it an inside joke? No matter how incompetent or how greedy, the government will always bail you out when your bank crashes. I mean, everyone has to know that, right? You know, everyone has to realize that no matter how bad I behave, no matter how big my race is, my bonuses and everything, you know, we will come in and bail it because we can't crash the economy, much the way SVB was argued that it was going to crash it. Do you believe that it's a running joke in the circles of banking that no matter how bad we behave, we're gonna be pulled, we're gonna be saved? Take it, anyone.
Senator, I don't believe that's the case.
Really? Like because every bank, you seemingly that crashed, it's like, hey, we could bail him out. Yeah, this one, crashed. We'll bail them out. So far, everything's been true. So doesn't it feel that now, if a bank really believed that they wouldn't be bailed out, now after bailing them out, these couple of bailouts, they are going to? Do you believe that that is not outrageous? That no matter how deplorable your performance is, you are made as whole, and all by test papers. So what do you believe? What if we didn't come out and bail out your bank? What would have happened?
So, Senator, I would answer the question 2 ways. One is, I think when people mostly talk about what you just said, it's talking about shareholders. And our shareholders lost their value. From a client perspective, I believe it was important and advocated for our clients to be protected. I believe the implications would have been significant. I think the ripple effect that could have happened in the banking industry would have been greater than was already there. I think small businesses would have been significantly impacted. And so I believe that that was appropriate, but obviously I was not part of that process and that decision.
Is it staggering? Is it a staggering responsibility that the head of a bank could literally crash our economy? It's astonishing. That's like if you have, I mean, like, and they also realize is that now they have a guaranteed way to be saved by how, you know. So it's you know, isn't it appropriate that this kind of control should be more stricter to prevent this kind of thing from going? Or should we just go on and start bailing and sailing whoever bank, regardless of how their conduct is? You know, I'll give you an example. The Republicans want to give a work requirement for SNAP. You know, for a hungry family has to have this kind of penalties or some kinds of working required. Shouldn't you have a working requirement after we sail your bank with billions of your bank? Because they seem to be more preoccupied than SNAP and requirements for works for hungry people, but not about protecting the taxpayers, you know, that will bail no matter whatever does about a bank to crash it. Chair?
Thank you, Senator Fetterman. I didn't see an eagerness on the panel to answer your questions. Thank you. I'll close the hearing. Mr. Becker, you've blamed pretty much everyone else for SVB's failures. We've heard that from people on both sides of the aisle, the Fed, your employees, the board, social media. It's hard to believe a 30-year bank executive and CEO for 12 years should have needed a roadmap from the regulators to find the obvious problems that needed to be fixed and weren't. Both banks sadly suffered from an unwillingness to fix known problems. The hearing certainly proved that. I think we already thought that. I expect these failures will be a warning to other executives to think about the long term and to address problems, whether or not the regulators have identified them multiple times. Thank you for the witnesses, for your testimony. For senators who wish to submit questions for the hearing, those questions are due 1 week from today, Tuesday, May 22nd. Witnesses, please submit your responses to questions for the record 45 days from the day you receive them. Thank you again for your testimony today. The hearing is adjourned.